welcome to My Stable Relationship, an equestrian performance podcast where we will deep dive into the mindset and management challenges of ourselves and of our peers. Our discussions will allow you to learn from experts, encourage you to set audacious goals, overcome challenges, and develop actionable plans. Ready? Let's do this. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the My Stable Relationship podcast. So I am so excited today because this is the first ever guest interview that we're doing on the podcast. And before we jump into what Lucy has to share with us about comparisonitis, I would really like to just say that there are so many important points to note throughout all of these interviews and so many golden threads and key takeaways that you can really take and really implement in your life, whether it's with your horses or in broader life with work and kids and family or anything else that you've got going on. So I just really hope that you listen to it from a horse perspective, but also from a broader life perspective. And I'd also like to say that it's so lovely to have Lucy on because she is the perfect example of someone who has allowed themselves to follow their passion and really develop a journey based on their purpose, their passion, and their skill sets. And I think that's really rare in today's society or today's culture. And we've talked with a few of our other upcoming guests about that as well. But I think Lucy's a really inspirational guest because of that. So I hope that you'll take that away from the podcast as well. Something that I'd like to do with these interviews going forward is I know a lot of podcast hosts do like a summary at the end of the interview where they jump back on and they tell you about their 1, 2, or 3 biggest learnings out of the episode. But what I'm going to do is I will actually base the next couple of episodes on things that are raised in the interview that perhaps we didn't really delve deeply into, and I can expand on in future episodes. So you'll hear from Lucy today, and what I will do is basically draw inspiration from some of the other things that she said, and we will deep dive into those in some of our future episodes. So I really want to make sure that we understand the full scope of what these guests are telling us and that we really have that opportunity to deep dive, not just into the topic that they bring to us today, but into some of those adjacent topics as well, because it's just so important for our development. So a little bit different to some other podcasts you might be listening to, but hopefully very, very helpful. And hopefully you'll enjoy hearing the guest interview and then a couple of follow-ups based on what the guest teaches us. So I am super excited. Let's not wait anymore. Let's jump straight into today's interview. Welcome everyone to the My Stable Relationship podcast. Today we have one of our first guests, Lucy. Lucy, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So glad to have you. So hey, why don't we start off by just telling everyone a bit about you and a bit about what you do at the moment.
Okay, I'm super multi-passionate, so I've got all the things happening, but I am an eventer, well, just coming back from having my second baby. So I do that. Then I've got a mindset coaching program as well. So I love the mindset side of things and helping people better themselves in competition and training and all the things. Yeah, mum, wife, I do some business coaching as well. And I used to be a massage therapist for horses and people. So that's pretty much an overview of me without getting too far into all the things. But yeah.
I love it. I love it. You sure did. And for everyone listening, that's actually how we met, because back when I was competing, you were looking after my horses for me.
Yeah. Rio, and I was doing a couple of your other ones as well, I think, too, at that stage. Yeah.
You sure were. So we actually go way back. So, hey, why don't you take us way back and tell us about when you first started with horses? Where did all of this passion come from?
So I started when I was competing about sort of 8-ish. We had some friends who were sort of into it, and so I got into it that way. And was never, I suppose, never had the lessons, never had the money behind us and all those sorts of things to be like the rider, I suppose, that I wanted to be at the time. And so finally, when I went to uni and I did my gap year and those things, I saved up money and bought myself a schoolmaster and started going that way. And just, it was so unreal to see people at uni, like who I stabled with, proper like competition people, I suppose you can just sort of like say how they looked after the horses and all the things that they did. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm so far behind. Like at this age, I should be doing this. And like, look at all the knowledge that they have, and just things about like they'd worked with like they were grooms before and worked with riders, and they just grew up with horsey parents, I suppose, knowing all the stuff. So that's kind of where I really got into eventing, and I kind of, I suppose in a way it was sort of later and didn't really know anybody in the eventing scene either. So I kind of come in not knowing anybody, not really knowing any of the rules, what I was doing. Like I did pony club eventing, but very different rules to horse trials and EA and all those sorts of things. So yeah, and then from there really had a passion for like sporting in general and wanted to do sort of physio and veterinary, and then sort of combine the two by doing equine massage and further studies through that. So yeah, combine the love of sports and riding plus like looking after the horses and everything, and then got really hit quite hard with comparisonitis in my business and riding probably more seriously once I'd started my business, because I was like, oh, I'm a massage therapist, my horse should be going like perfect and it should be doing this. And so I had that kind of not wanting to compete, because if my horses weren't like top level, then people would be like, oh, you're not a good massage therapist then. And then just having like the industry really boomed after I got started, probably about 2 years after I started, there was just massage therapists popping up everywhere. And so I was like, oh, they're going to be better than me. They know this, they know that. Like those sorts of things used to really sort of like, smash me a fair bit. So once I started, like I kind of got into mindset from doing a myofascia release. Like I loved sort of the mindset side of things, but I did a myofascia release course for the horses. And that was really about how all your fascia can trap all your emotions and past experiences and all of that sort of stuff. And it was I literally cried for nearly 2 weeks of like getting my emotions out and the horses' emotions, because I can really feel their emotions when I go there. It's really weird. But yeah, that's kind of where I really sort of kicked off into looking like deeper into the mindset and doing my own personal development, and then coming out the other side and wanting to help others with it as well. So yeah.
That's beautiful though, because it sounds like it was really a journey of you following your passions and really trying to help like yourself and your horses out, that's kind of taken you along the journey.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So I remember one of your older competition horses, was it Con?
Yeah, Connie. I'm not actually long sold her, only bit over 12 months ago. Yeah.
And then do you have a couple of others now? You're riding other people's horses now too, aren't you?
Yeah, so I've just started with that actually yesterday. I have a foal I bred from Con. So Ali, I've got her going. So she's done a couple of comps at the moment. And then I've got another big warm blood mare that I've bred as well. So she got broken in a bit over 12 months ago. I kind of didn't really get much riding in. And so she hasn't really done anything, but I'm about to send her back to the trainer to have another crack at her. And then I'll hopefully take her on. But yeah, just started riding some local horses for a local show jumper. He's just super busy with work and just wants to be able to compete on the weekend. So I'm riding them twice a week for him. So yeah, that's what. And Con's gone to, she's bloody legend. If anyone's seen her, she's like the horse for me. Went to a beautiful rider down around Albury way, and a little 12-year-old, and they are nailing it. Just like she's giving them so much confidence and they're going so well together. So just like, yeah. It's great.
Oh, beautiful. I hope I get to see them out and about one day together.
Yeah, I travelled down actually just after having Harry 2 weeks. I think it was, about 2 weeks after I had him. They were down at Albury Horse Trials doing their first 80. So I was like, oh, I've got to come and see you. So yeah, it was good.
Oh my goodness. Did you take him with you at 2 weeks old?
Yeah. The four of us all went. So Ben was wrangling Jack, and then I had Harry. Like he actually slept most of the whole way, and then pretty much in the pram the whole time. So yeah, on the way back he was all cramped up, so he needed to cry and burp all the way home, but yeah, we got there eventually.
That's amazing. So tell me more about that mindset work that you've been doing. You went to that first course and you really saw the difference that it could make, and then where did you take it from there? I know you gave us a little intro at the start, but how did it kind of transition into what you're doing now?
So I started with, I suppose Tony Robbins was like my first kind of real mindset person that I went to. So my husband and I went to Unleash the Power Within in Sydney, and that was just like, that was epic. I loved that. A lot of rah-rah for people who are like getting into mindset and stuff like that. So there is a lot of rah-rah with it, but some people love this and some people don't. I'm very like straight shooter, straight to the point. I don't be like, oh, yes, it's okay. And like, I still support people, but it's like not a very, we just kind of get in and get the work done type thing. Like people have got to be ready to do the work. And I found Tony very straight to the point like that as well. He was just like, this is kind of it. And this is what everyone's like, this is what it just comes down to. So without all the fluff, this is what people are wanting out of life, like common things that people deal with. And then it's just kind of, rolled on from books and other like Tony Robbins, and I'm following Peter Crone at the moment. Love his work. I'm hoping to join his mastermind in a couple of weeks. But yeah, just going from everywhere and then using like business mindset stuff as well. Like it's just, mindset is just the thing that holds everything together and then holds everybody back from doing the things they want, achieving all the bits and pieces. So it's just kind of been, I suppose, taking it from everywhere. Like Tony was probably the starting point, and then just working with business coaches as well, and then just like coming from all different aspects and finding random people online. And
I love it. I was thinking the other day, if you think back to like, I don't know, 5, 7, 10 years ago when we were competing, and the like person that like me in particular I was, if you had told me that I'd be doing mindset work, I would have told you where to shove it. Like I did not think it was important. I really felt that I could just force the horses to do what I want. Like I was really in this state of mind whereby to keep up with everyone, I just had to work harder, be better, do more. So it's what's so lovely is we've both made this transition into the mindset world, but in totally different ways. But it's getting more and more common, which I think is so fabulous. Are you saying that as well?
Yeah, and so needed. Like I just find through social media, and like I don't really like, not trolling people trolling me or anything, but just watching like I've had sponsored riders with my massage and all that before, and just the things that people say to them, and like people having to justify everything, like, oh, don't mind my position or my lower leg, or everybody's so scared and worried about being judged and fearful that people are just going to attack them all the time. And like I sent a message to someone, I was like, your position is fine. Like, don't even give that up. Like, don't give that power away to somebody else. And they were like, oh, thank you so much. Like, that's just made my day. And commented to someone about like lower leg with the emoji of like top notch or whatever. And they're like, oh, thank you. Like, that means so much to me. And I'm like, people they just hammer each other all the time. Like, it can be such a narky sport between young riders, I think. And then that can kind of carry through to like people coming back from having kids or having a break and getting back into riding, and they feel whether they left in that time and they've got that fear and judgment from back when they were riding when they were younger, or they've just lost confidence and like coming back. I just feel like it's, there's just so many different aspects and like levels of it, but it's just, across the board, I feel can be very, I don't know. And I suppose people, like, there's a lot of money in the sport as well. Like there's both ends of the scale with that too. And you look at people, and I think not everything's like comparisonitis, like comparing yourself is bad. I think to look at someone and have inspiration is good, but then once it gets into that comparing, that's when it starts to get toxic there. So like being able to differentiate between looking at someone and inspiring to be that, compared to comparing yourself to them and wishing that you had that something better, or that you're not as good as them.
Totally agree. And actually, maybe we should just jump into our topic for today, because That was like the perfect little intro into our topic.
Don't I?
I love it. So let's just start with, do you want to tell us what the topic is for today? I think you already hinted to it. And what is it? What does that mean?
Yeah. So we're chatting about comparisonitis. So pretty well just like what I sort of touched on then is like simple terms is comparing yourself to other people or someone else, and feeling as if you're not as good or your life's not as good compared to them in simple terms. Like, yeah. So it can happen to anybody at all different levels, like whether you're starting or at like elite level, like it can just grab you at any stage, and just being able to have the tools then to notice that and not get caught in that spiral. Yeah.
So how does it show up? What do you see in your clients? How do you know, or how do they know that they're in comparisonitis?
Yeah. So it can come like I said, all different stages. And it can be kind of just like going along, and then it can be like a slap in the face, or you can feel like you've had it for a long time. So it's starting to just talk to yourself like, oh, I hope that, like, even in the warm-up area, so I hope that horse isn't in my class, or God, she looks like a good rider, or I wish I looked that good in my riding gear, or if I had money, I would be able to ride that well as well. I would be able to get those lessons, have the truck, like all those sorts of things. Like, it doesn't have to be, it can sneak up on you because it becomes a habit and you may not actually notice that you're doing it. And it's even like if you're in a group of friends and they mention like something negative sort of thing about another rider or somebody else, that's still part of that comparisonitis. It can be hard to notice because it can be such a habit now that you just think, I'm not good enough. I shouldn't be here. Yeah, like especially when you get to those higher levels, I feel as well, you can be like, oh, you can create this perception of what you feel like, for example, what a one-star horse should be like and how it should go, how it should compete, what it should look like. And then you start to be like, well, I don't look like that, or my horse doesn't go that way, or like it's just you've conditioned yourself to think that that's the level like that it should be at. Yeah.
So we talked a little bit there about competition type examples. Do you ever see it showing up for like a non-competitive rider, or someone who's rehabbing their horse, or anyone who's not competitive at all?
Yeah, it can like definitely show up as like that why me, like why is this happening as well. So if you're on the track and you're going places and you're doing like your trail riding or whatever you want to do, and then it can also be like a mum wanting to get back in and say like, why don't I have the time? Like, why isn't my husband supporting me? Like feeling like you're the only one that doesn't have all the time to do all the things, or my horse has been injured. Like, why does that keep happening to me? I wish I had better facilities or the money to put into vet bills and stuff like that. Like, it just can happen anywhere at any stage. And riding, I actually had a client yesterday, and we're talking about how not that her mother-in-law or sister-in-law, so they ride and they're into the showing, not that I've ever really said anything to her, but she feels like judged, and they're comparing her like to them, like because she feels like she's got to prove herself out of like nowhere. So like, this is where we dig into like, where has this happened in your life? What's made you feel like you've ever had to prove yourself? And yeah, so it can doesn't have to show up as someone actually saying something, but it can be past conditioning that you've come up with, that you've had to prove yourself to someone, or you feel like you've had to, she's felt that. So
yes. And so on this podcast we've been talking a lot about how your thoughts create your feelings. So that is the perfect example, what you're saying, how they haven't said anything to her. They haven't necessarily done anything to make her feel like she has to compare, or she's being compared, but she somehow over time, her thoughts have formed this feeling of comparisonitis.
Yeah. And then you get that like that self-sabotaging sort of element coming in. So then you see as well, a lot of riders will write, oh, it wasn't like happy with this result because we only got to ride 2 days. Like, are you are you making yourself only ride 2 days so you've got an excuse to be like, we only got to ride 2 days? Or are you putting in, like, are you not wanting to put the effort in so you don't feel like you're disappointed compared to somebody else? Or are you really trying? Or like, what's coming in then to make you feel like it's okay not to be where you want to be?
Yes. It's like it leads to what actions and results you take, right? So it's like, are you justifying it, or are you self-rejecting? Like, are you doing something to stop you so that you then can justify the comparison?
Definitely.
It's so interesting how our minds do that to us.
Yeah. And it's all connected. Like, it's such a loop. And I used to say this about the horses. It's so annoying that, like with massaging them, that why can't it just be their back that's sore? Why does it have to be like their neck that's doing it? Or like, it's everywhere that's attached to, it's showing up in the back, but it's referred from everywhere else. So same sort of thing. Like,
As you were talking about it, I was thinking about this one example that came up for me of a time when I was competing, and I was at a cross country event, but so we were doing our dressage, and the dressage arena was in the middle of the cross country course. Like, I don't know why, but there was like a couple of big roll tops around the back of the dressage arena, and Rio just was not going to have it. And in the warm up, there had been this gorgeous rider and this gorgeous horse, and it was exactly what you were saying. I was like, please let them not be in my class, because I'm on a hot thoroughbred, and that is the most gorgeous warm blood I've ever seen. And she was in my class. But on top of that, I felt just awful having those thoughts about her, because when Rio wouldn't go into the arena when it was our time to do the dressage, she came out of the warm up and she rode in front of me and led Rio into the arena. And I thought, oh no, I felt just terrible. And it's amazing that you can be doing a million other things. Like, I was, riding the horse, trying to work out my test, trying to practice movements. And meanwhile, my brain was like well over somewhere else, thinking about someone else's beautiful warm blood. So do you see things like that often with your clients?
Yeah. And it comes to like being worried, even like that feeling of unworthiness as well, that you're not as good as them. So you don't want to approach them and speak to them, or like coaches, like how many coaches have you missed out on the opportunity to pick their brain because you feel like you're not good enough to speak to them, when they are like the loveliest people ever? Like that, like you might have been, whether it was like like the horse, or you're like, oh, she's too good. Like, she's probably like, and so many people, like, you just get your game face on when you ride too. So like, I have a resting bitch face, which happens quite often. And you're just like, oh, she must be such a bitch. Like, and then you speak to them and you're like, I wish I spoke to you. Like, I've seen you at comps for the last 5 years. I wish I spoke to you then. Like, it's just, so much opportunities can be missed. And it's just the smallest little things.
Totally agree. So something I was thinking out of my example was that we do this thing, I think, which is we only focus on their strengths. Like, we're seeing what's good about them and we're so worried or jealous about it. I mean, for all I know, she was going through a divorce, she was having other problems in her life, but like, my mind didn't care about that. Is that something that comes up with comparisonitis?
Yeah. And that feeling that they've always got it better, like their life's just like top notch, it's perfect, and then you're the one who's always battling, feeling like you're the victim. And it's that what did I call it the other day, the when and then syndrome. So like, when I have this, then I'll be happy, or when I can do that, then I'll be happy. And so you have no idea what's happening in anybody else's life. Like, they could have not been able to ride for the last 20 years because of family, that's it, divorce, money, anything. And they've finally got the money together and brought this horse. They might be leasing the horse. Like, they might have just got it for a ride to get back into it, or for a confidence boost or something. And that's it. They could have lost their confidence and they've used this horse to get back into where they are. And it's just so, like, you just don't know anyone's background and what they've had to go through. And they're probably doing the exact same thing to you. Like they're in the same position. So you're like, everyone's so worried about what people are thinking of them and fearful of judgment and that, but everyone's in the same boat. So everybody's riding around the arena at the warm-up being like, oh, that horse is nicer. Like everyone thinks they're being judged by the others, but that's everybody. Like everyone's in the same boat at the moment. Like, yeah, so it's no one cares. Everyone's too focused on themselves in the warm-up to actually think and care about whatever anybody else is doing. And it's always those thoughts that we're having, they're always better than us. So like if I'm worried about their judgment on me, they're always looking at me going, I wish I was that person. Like you're never picking up the bad stuff about people. It's always like picking out the good things that you wish you had. So yeah.
I really like that reframe as well, because although maybe we can't always get out of our heads, sometimes it's worthwhile just thinking, well, everyone else is also in their heads, right? So I don't have to worry about me plus a million other people. I'll just worry about me and they're worried about them, and that's the reframe. So I kind of like that.
Yeah. And smile in the warm-up, guys. Just a random note in here, smile, because it makes such a difference to yourself and to everybody in the warm-up. Like, I don't know how many people that I know, like some people are serious and they just, like I said, game face and that earlier, but like if you ride past someone, give them a smile, because it's almost like a fresh of breath air. You can just go, oh, okay. And then I swear your riding will like increase 10% anyway when you just breathe. So
yeah. That's something that my show jumping instructor used to yell at me from the side of the ring, breathe.
Yeah.
But it never works when people are yelling at you to breathe, let me tell you.
I am breathing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm breathing, like I'm upright and I'm awake. Yeah. So something's happening.
That's one thing that I wish they didn't take out of the eventing test. You know, like now you don't halt at the start. That used to be like my real ride up, and I'd be like, and breathe and let's go. And now I'm like up the center line. Well, not now. Like before I was like, okay, right, which way am I going? Like, what am I doing? Like there's so much happening in your mind. Whereas like when you used to come up and you're just like, okay, it's fine. We're just halting first, breathing, and then moving on.
I love that. I love that as a reset. And my mind was immediately like, yeah, but I have a thoroughbred. I can't stop. I could barely ever stop at the end of the test.
Yeah. But that's it. And we're talking about like, this is kind of a little bit off track how I said that I go on rants, but like reframing that to be like, okay, so what have you got? Like you've got a thoroughbred. So many people are like that. They've got a hot horse. Reframe that mindset to be, I'm a good rider. I can handle this sort of horse. Or like, what lessons do I need to be softer in my aids? And like what tools can I take from this to be able to move on to another horse later on? Like there's just so much to be able to reframe that mindset. Everything's a lesson, nothing's bad. And you can only ever address a situation with the current knowledge that you have at that time. So like there's no point, like when you start going, oh, I should have done that or could have, like, no, because it didn't happen that way. Like you didn't know that was going to happen. You didn't know that response was going to come from that. So now you've learned that. So next time it happens, you've got that little bit of extra information that you can assess and whether that works or not at that time. But like there's just, you can't say to yourself, I should have done this, because you didn't. And you didn't have that knowledge of what was going to happen from that event and that reaction. So you've learned that lesson, and now you can take that into the next situation.
So. Yes, I actually call it best current thinking with my clients. And I actually use that in my work as well. So like anytime in my corporate career that someone asks me something, and let's say I'm like, I have current knowledge, but I'm not 100% sure how something's going to turn out.
Yep.
I'll say my best current thinking is, and then I'll give my little statement. But it's such a good way of doing it. And it really helps me to be like, I don't always have to be right. I don't always have to have the answer. This is my best current thinking.
Yeah. And that's when you start going like, oh, I should have got this test and I should have got that. And when you look at the scores too, like remember, it's an outside perception. Like the judge, it's there. Like that's why I feel like going off scores and stuff is so hard but it's so easy to just be affected by them and seeing your list, like your name on the list of results, where you are in that, especially after your dressage, because it's someone else's perception. It's not just how many rails you got, what happened, like that. That can really really beat you down if you're so stuck on what people think and you're worried about like the scores that you're getting. That judge doesn't know, like that could have been your best canter transition that you've had in weeks, like whether it's just like whatever's happening at home, but that judge doesn't know that. And you could be so happy with that and then get the scores. And if you aren't in that right mind frame, you can just be like, oh, it really wasn't that good. Like, why do I even bother? Why am I here?
And just you saying that has triggered something in me, which is when we talk about equestrian sports, we are in a sport built upon comparing. Like that's where we've grown up. We're paying. Yeah, we're paying to get compared, which blows my mind. So no wonder we have all grown up building this kind of comparisonitis inside of ourselves. It's like we're preempting what we're going in there to do anyway.
Yeah, that's it. And when I don't know if you mentioned it earlier, if I was just thinking about this, was that where focus goes, energy flows. So how you, like I've been loving this lately about working with clients about they come to a situation and they've got that nervous, that worried feeling, and you're creating your future to happen in that same, like create that same result. Because I don't know if your listeners are kind of into, like, it's not really the woo, but it's physics as well, knowing about like attracts like, so similar energy, that's how you're drawn to like friends and that, because you're in the same sort of wavelength. If you're doing that, and if you're in that comparisonitis, that negative feelings and thoughts, and even comparing yourself at this comp to last comp, going, I hope I get a better result this time. I hope this doesn't happen. I hope he picks up the right canter lead. Last time in the walk, they trotted. You're creating that energy of that frequency that you're in, which is then going to create that result again. So you need to be able to notice that and like pull yourself away from that. And then, be able to like reframe that to be able to think of the positive versus the negative, because like if we're talking about it here, it's no more likely to have that negative outcome to the positive one, because we've made it up here over the Zoom.
Yeah. Kind of on that reframing piece that we were talking about, I was going to ask if we can be having comparisonitis against ourselves as well. And I think you a little bit touched on it there, but for me, it showed up like when Rio was injured.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, I couldn't do things that we could do 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And I was beating myself up about it. And I was wondering, is that a form of comparisonitis?
Yeah, I'd say definitely. And even the point where, so in my program, we go through bringing up these thoughts and not being hard on yourself for having them, like becoming aware of these thoughts. You can then like beat yourself up for having that thought about yourself, where like, no, you need to acknowledge it. And it's about our ego as well. So our ego is there and our brain is to keep us safe. And so they want to keep us safe. And you need to be like, okay, no, thank you. But I'm going to ride this dressage test and I'm going to nail it. Like they're like, oh, because it's giving us past situations where we may have failed or learnt the lesson, and it doesn't want to, our brain for survival mode doesn't want to put us back into that situation. So it's creating, oh, this could happen or this could happen. But like, yeah, you need to, when you bring these up to deal with like what you've, like how he was saying, how you can compare yourself to other people, having those thoughts, like how you said, maybe she was going through a divorce, or like, you can't beat yourself up for then thinking those things about the people. Like, yeah, if that makes sense. I feel like I'm kind of, being able to.
Yes. It's like a layer upon a layer of beating yourself up. So it's like you've changed the thought, you've tried to reframe it, and then you're still beating yourself up now for a different reason.
Because you had that thought.
Yeah.
Like you've got it, yeah. And that's part of the work, is being able to accept that and then know if that thought is serving you or not, and then reframing the new thought. So if it's not serving you, then you move on and you create a new thought about that. So one thing we're working on last week or the week before is a phrase saying like, I choose. So what do you choose? Like, I choose love. So I choose to love my journey. I choose to love the fact that I get to ride. I have time to ride. Like, some people might choose happiness, like whatever works for you. And you choose to be happy at a competition. You choose to enjoy your friends and be happy in that way, or like happy that you get to ride, that your horse is still sound. I think that journey is so important, especially for horse riders, because she can just go wrong so quickly with horses. Like, they could be gone tomorrow. They can be lame. Like, they could just tread on a piece of wire and they can't be a ridden horse anymore. So apart from like separating us and you, like your life, it's important to enjoy the journey. But when you look at having a horse and being on a journey with that, I think it's so much more important, because that's it. Like, you could have a horse about to go Grand Prix dressage and something's happened and you're like, oh, we didn't get to the goal. But like, the journey, you've got to be there. And like, yeah, things can just end tomorrow with horses. Like, they're so temperamental that anything can happen. So it's really about and I was speaking to this client yesterday as well about the season that you're in. So part of your journey is knowing, like for me now with 2 young kids, I can't expect to be competing at like some, like Emma Mason, she's probably back competing at 4-star already, I'm pretty sure. And comparing me, like I wasn't at that level anyway, but comparing me having 2 young kids as well compared to Emma Mason, like we've literally been around the same time. She wrote in a post as well that, because everyone was like, oh, super mum. And she's like, no, behind that, I've got a nanny and I've got this. Like, you don't know what people have got as well. Like, I don't have a nanny. I don't have that. So like, for me to get time to actually ride my horses is like 0 to none at the moment. Like, it's so small, especially like until we get routines and that. So you can't compare your journey and how, like, what's happening, because you don't know what help and that is behind the person, what team they've got behind them.
So going back to what you were saying about those I choose statements, then do you have one then that helps you when you're like, let's say with the Emma and you situation, with the kids and her getting back to it so quickly, but with the nanny, like you said, do you have one that helps you?
Yeah, so mine is I choose love. So for me, like, I've chosen like love, like my family. So I wanted to have this family, and I'm loving the journey of family versus like fitting in the horses as well. I love the fact that, like, even now I'm kind of not switching, but when I compete, it's going to be show jumping for the next while, because it's not camping overnight. It's just a short time. I can easily get like mum or Ben to come and have Jack, or have Jack for the day, and I've only got Harry or whatever. So just being able to love that season, like I'm in having kids season at the moment, like, and I don't want to miss that, and I want to spend the time with them. So again, not comparing to like anyone, not saying that like Emma doesn't want to spend time with her kids or anything like that, but just the season that I'm in and what I'm accepting is choosing to love the journey that I am on and love the fact that I get to ride. So whether it's show jumping or whether it's just going out and getting, for me, a moment, an hour to ride my horses, like just loving this point in time that I'm in and what I get to do. So yeah, mine is love.
No, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
So 2 things. Mine, if I had to choose, would be either calm or confident. So you know how you pick words, well, in a lot of these mindset work, you pick words at the start of the year that kind of represent how you want your year to go.
Yeah.
Mine was always confident, calm, and spacious.
Yeah.
Because I tend to like force myself down and commit to too many things and really drive myself into the ground. So confident, calm, and spacious.
Yeah.
So that would have been mine. But I think you also made a really important point there, which was neither is right or wrong. Like how someone is doing something and how you're doing something.
Yeah.
They're both right. They both work for you in that situation. So comparing is useless in that sense anyway, because neither is right, neither is wrong. It's just whatever works for you.
Yeah. Like that's it. You literally cannot compare, because you're a completely different person and you're on a completely different journey. So to compare the two is just like ludicrous, really. Like when it comes down to it, it's your imagination. Your imagination is stopping you generally from doing things. That's crazy, isn't it? When you think, like, as a kid, people are like, oh, you've got such a good imagination and like you're off playing, and it has this very made up sense, which is what it is. And then when you then put it into now as an adult, especially, you're like, oh my God, it's my imagination. I'm making up all this stuff. Like, it's not even true. Like, for something to be true, it has to be 100% true, 100% of the time. So like, it's literally made up. You're just making up all this random stuff in your brain.
Yes. We talk about it here as like, it has to be provable in a court of law for it to be true. It has to be a fact, right?
Yeah.
And you're so right. Everything that we're making up in our brains, not provable. Just absolutely not true.
Yeah.
So on that then, if we can reframe it even further, do you think comparisonitis can ever be a good thing or a useful thing?
Yeah, I think before we actually announced the topic, I touched on this before. So being able to look at comparisonitis in a sense of inspiration. So looking for someone to be like, oh, I would love to get to that point, or helping you set goals and like those sorts of things where it's not toxic to be, I wish I had that, like that thought thinking of that you don't have it. Whereas thinking, like, it can be good thinking, how do I get to that? I'd love to get to that stage. What can I do? How do I break that down? How can I stay? Like, she seems so motivated. What is she doing? How can I be that motivated to get to that point as well? So I think it can definitely be positive in a way as well. But as soon as it starts to be putting yourself down and speaking to yourself in that negative connotation, that's where it becomes that negative comparisonitis, instead of being like inspiration and seeing what's possible. Even with like business coaching, you get in the room with people who have done it before you, and if you get in that room and then put yourself down, you're not going to go anywhere anyway. But being able to get in the room with people to get their advice, their lessons, their learnings, and then help you like on the same journey as well, that's where it's helpful.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing, and for everyone listening then, what's really important is the thought and the feeling behind it. So are you using it in a positive way or a negative way, and how's it making you feel?
Yeah.
So it could be as well that you think you're using it in a positive way, but it's still making you really anxious, really nervous, really stressed, or is that the case?
Yeah. And then that's how we touched on before about those feelings, like how is it making you feel? And then the actions and the results that come from that. So then if you think that you're looking at someone for inspiration and you're like, oh, I'd love to do that. I'd love to get to that point. I can't wait. I'm going to work hard. How does that make you feel? Does it make you feel excited, motivated, or does it make you feel anxious that you're not good enough, that you're unworthy? So like comparing those two feelings, and then you go, okay, so what actions are you going to take? So if you're then unmotivated and you're not taking action, then that's where it becomes like that comparisonitis. Whereas if the actions that you're taking from that are like, yep, I'm going to time schedule to make sure that I get to ride. I'm going to do this. I'm going to plan out the steps that I need to take to get to that goal, like breaking them down, not just having this huge unrealistic goal. I love setting unrealistic goals, like 10xing and really like shooting for the stars. But like that's about the person that you're becoming in that journey. So if you just expect to be like, okay, at the end of the year, I want to go from 80 centimeters to a 2-star rider. Like some people can do it, but majority of people can't. Okay. So, but just having that as your goal and not breaking that down. Okay. So I need to have lessons. I need to watch YouTube if you can't afford lessons, and like work out how you're going to get there. Are you going to start trotting over a pole and then like putting 2 poles and working out your distances? Like if you don't break that down, like for someone who can break that down, that's giving them the actions of that positive influence, not the comparisonitis. And then the results from that are they actually going to get there, instead of being unmotivated and not doing the work, then they're not going to get the results.
And I think there's a real distinction there between Like, are you actually taking action?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
are you sitting in like inaction and not doing anything? So I think that's really cool as well. And like, same thing, this all applies to people who are competitive or non-competitive. So like, same thing, if you want to go and you want to go do the Bicentennial Trail on your horse, you're not going to get there if you're not working the horse, or if you're not building up or riding like, a K a day, 2Ks a day. So same thing. What is that action?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's it. If you can use it to be like some people, like I'm super competitive. And so using that as like, oh, I want to be better, like not doing it to put myself down, but like seeing someone, even like at the gym, I'm always like, when I was fit, that is, I'm like, right, I want to win this time worked out, like this timed workout. So I'm like pushing myself to do that. I'm taking the action, I'm getting there, making sure I'm doing it all properly, compared to just being like, oh, I'm not going to win anyway, or like they're better than me, so not actually putting in the effort. You can be competitive and look at people and want to be better than them. Like that's how you grow, and like that growth. But as long as you're doing, like taking the action and it's making you feel good, then it's fine.
Yeah. And I love that, again, everyone, the key is making you feel good, because so I'm also super competitive. We know this about each other. We're like aggressive competitive. But what that sometimes means is that there's like a threshold, right? And I can sometimes tip over the threshold.
Yep.
Where I'm not being healthy anymore. I'm not taking good actions anymore. I'm in excess, or like I'm doing too much. We're killing ourselves over things. So it's kind of, you've got to balance it both ways, I think, is what we're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's it. Either way, it doesn't become healthy. Like
Mm.
if you're too over competitive and you're stuck in that, can also be unhealthy, compared to not being like competitive and in that comparisonitis and feeling that you're not good enough, not taking the action. So it's like, it's with anything really. The two extremes are just, you want to have that homeostasis and have that balance, I suppose. Like, yeah, it's so hard to say like balance, because balance to everybody is different. And that's it, how we spoke about the different seasons. Things are going to like up and down and ebb and flow. So it's just, yeah, you just got to roll with the punches sometimes as well. Like, yeah.
Totally agree. So Lou, what can people do? How do they notice it? What's the first step towards resolving comparisonitis?
Yeah. So awareness is really your first step. So becoming aware of the thoughts that you're having, and how I mentioned that it may become a habit. So you may not actually notice yourself doing it, but just sitting down or taking note when you're at comps, or when you're at home, or watching social media, things like that, becoming aware of the thoughts that are coming up in your mind. And if it doesn't feel like it's comparisonitis as such, and it is in that habit stage, it'll come up regularly. Like if it's something that you're like, oh, I get this feeling, and oh no, it's not comparisonitis. But if it's coming up regularly, then yeah, that's when you notice that habit is part of comparisonitis. So yeah.
And that's a good one too, because like you just said, perhaps you can't pinpoint the thought that's causing it, but there will be that feeling that comes up over and over again.
Yeah. And then yeah, from there, being able to make that, like make the choice whether it's serving you or not. So going through these thoughts, and something that pops up into your head, and it's thinking that you're not good enough to be here, is that really serving you? Like, is that going to get you towards the goal that you want? And then deciding if that is serving you, which generally, no, it's not. And so being able to then, reframe that new thought. Even if it's, I'm not where I had originally planned to be this year at this point in time, but this is what I've learned. And I've listened to my horse. Like even riders that have had to go and take their horses down levels because of like, whether it's them or the horse confidence issues or something like that's happened, or the horse wasn't strong enough. They may have seen, say, their physio or something, and the horse is not dealing with the amount of work, or they're continually getting injured because they haven't done the foundation, say. They've sort of just jumped up the levels because the horse could do it. Being able to, go back and look at like that's fine. And what lessons have I learned coming forward from that? Being able to reframe and make the decision not to sit in that negative, the victim mindset, the poor me, it's not even, I don't hate the word, but for me, when I was starting in this sort of work, the word trauma, to me, I would have been like, I don't have trauma. For me, then it was such a association, like, and this is a very sensitive topic for like a lot of people. It's doesn't have to be those bad situations of like the abuse and those sorts of things. It can literally be someone not listening to you, or your coach laughing at you when you asked a question and that has made you feel like you should know the answers, so I can't speak up in a lesson anymore. Like all of those little things are trauma. So it's, being able to become aware of them and then choose not to sit in that feeling, because that's what's keeping you stuck, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think what you're saying is so important, because I think what we're saying is you don't need to reframe it to 180 degrees, right? So you don't need to go from I can't do this to I'm the best ever at this, right? You need to reframe it in a way that it's still believable to you, but that it's serving you. If I've summarized that correctly.
Yep. Yeah, in a much better way than I have. Yeah, like breaking down those goals and seeing what you've learned, and like, it's not like if you tell yourself that's it, that something that you don't believe, you're not going to believe it, and you're not going to get into that higher vibration to attract the more, like the better things that you want. You're going to be like, oh, that's bullshit. So taking those smaller steps and breaking them down and reframing each thought that you have is going to allow you to become that person that you need to be.
Yeah. And actually, if you don't reframe it to something believable, I think you're compiling onto the trauma. Like, I think if you, let's say you're comparing to someone in the ring and you want to jump that height, you being like, I can absolutely jump that height, and then you go and fail at it, or you don't believe that you can do it, you're adding another reason as to why it went wrong or why it didn't work for you. So got to be really careful in that reframe.
Yeah, definitely. And then making sure that's it. It's got to be believable, because if it's not for you, like it may be a little bit harder at the start, but if you can't get around that and support that new reframe, then you're not actually, like, you're still going to beat yourself up for thinking that you think that, if that makes sense. So then it's like, if you, like, it's something like you said, like going into the ring there and having a rail is then going to, if you feel that you're not good enough and then you have that rail, it's cementing that thought inside your head, like, I've had a rail, I'm definitely not good enough.
Yeah, you've proved it to yourself.
Yeah, that's it. So being able to break those, and it's like, it is like I feel like I've said journey in this podcast 1,000 times, but it is that journey from, you can't expect to be here and notice now, like just becoming aware that you're suffering from comparing yourself and comparisonitis, to not have it ever again. Like, I don't feel like you can ever really get rid of it, because like new level, new devil, you're going to experience all these things, but having that mindset behind you to be able to go, oh no, I reject that thought. This is where I'm going with this. So like different experiences are always going to happen in life, which are going to bring up these thoughts, but being able to reject that and then reframe to what you want to achieve is how you deal with that moving forward. Like, you can't just expect to be a superstar, and like it's got to be realistic.
Yeah. And that's such a good point too, that new level, new devil, you will never just get rid of comparisonitis. Like, a great example, like I used to compare when Rio and I were competing. When he injured himself when he was in rehab, I was comparing how quickly other horses with a collateral ligament injury were coming back into work.
Yeah.
And I just, like, it makes no sense. And then I put him into classical dressage, and now I'm like, yeah, but can he do a piaffe yet?
Yeah.
I'm like, what? So you just have to watch your brain at every level. And I think that's such an important message. So thank you for that.
That's all right. Something that I feel like this is not really about it, but kind of is like young horse classes. Everyone's getting there, and like some breeders getting these horses to young horse classes. And when I was like massaging, I was like, these movements are so unrealistic for a young horse to develop properly and move up, but they all want to be in this point because they're like, I've got to show that my horse can do it and it's got potential. Like, it's still in that sort of mindset of like, I've got to show everybody, otherwise I won't be good enough. Otherwise, if I don't win this 4-year-old class, it means it's not going to be a good horse for the future. Like, it's putting those timeframes on yourself to be able to achieve something as well, especially like you're working with an animal that has their own personality, their own way of going, everything. Like, you can't expect, okay, by a 4-year-old, they should be able to do this, when so much, like, it's so unrealistic for, like, they've got to do, I haven't looked at them for years, but like, it was like an extended trot and
half pass.
Breeding now they're a lot more expressive, but still, to be able to hold that for a young horse, it's probably only been broken in for 12 months or like 2 years. Like, they shouldn't be at that level, but it's that thinking that if they're not here, they're not good enough. Like, still comparing, those sorts of things even is,
I think that brings up like another point, which is perhaps everyone for themselves needs to think about what they are doing with their horse and why. And if it's for that point of comparison, like you were talking about with the young horse classes, or if it's actually like something that's going to support them getting to where they want to be with their horse long term.
Yep.
Like, let's say you do want to reach Grand Prix with your horse. If you are putting it into a young horse class and it's having to do those movements early, is that supporting it or serving it for the long term?
Yeah.
Everyone's choice, but certainly that's a form of comparison in itself.
Yeah. Sarah Hudson and I had a chat last night on socials, and she reframed this as well. Like, she had a horse and was going back to the basics, because and we're talking how it's important to have goals, but you also need to allow your horse to be the best version of himself or herself. It's not just about you. And so if that's, like you said, then if that's not serving that horse at that point in time, like, you need to listen to them as part of, whether you, like, if you get a horse at the same time as someone else and you go, oh, well, they're at this level, but your horse is completely different. That's where you need to listen, like, learn to listen to your horse and not be worried about what this person's doing, because you and your horse are different. And you, like, your horse might need to have 3 seasons at prelim, and then it's going to skyrocket through the star levels. Whereas this other horse might be like rocketing through the lower levels, and then it's going to woo up at the top levels. Like, you're still probably going to get there. Like, your success is inevitable as long as you keep going. But how you get there is dependent on your horse and the way that you ride. And you need to stop thinking that you need to be at this certain point at the same time as someone else, because it doesn't work for you or your horse. Like, longevity, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah. So it's like comparisonitis for yourself and comparisonitis for your horse.
Yeah.
And actually, I think too, what we're saying there is, if you're not conscious about it, you might see people do some pretty terrible things or put a lot of pressure on their horse in order to meet that level of thinking, or to whatever the comparison has driven them to do.
Yeah, there's so much underlying stuff to it. Like, I was talking to someone and they're like, oh, this is spooky. Like, when we associated the things that she was putting, like, so she didn't want to jump at home with no one there because she was worried that her horse would lose confidence. And I was like, okay, so have you and your horse, so they've like had a fall or they've hit rails and stuff like that, and the horse's confidence wasn't shattered. It was fine. Like, nothing come of it. But then as we dug deeper, we got into, like, she got the horse around the same time that her dad passed away, and had kind of put like this protective barrier around her horse. And like, when we were talking, there was words coming up like, I've had to pull the pieces together, and I'm like a control. And like, when people say to you, even control freak. So where in your life earlier on, have you felt like you didn't have control of your life? And so now that you feel like you're the boss, like, even if this is not coming, like, this is not how it's really presenting, but it may feel like you're finally got control over something. And so in the ring, you're like, no, wait, no, go, what? Like, and you're so over adjusting and so fiddling with everything the horse is doing, because you're now that control freak, and you tell yourself that I'm just a control freak. Okay, so where has this come up from? Like, what's created this thought?
Yeah.
For so many little different things, like, there's always that underlying condition of like, your conditioning of what you've been taught, what you've heard growing up. And that's it, how I said, like, that trauma could have been you as a kid going, mum, mum, mum. And then they're like, what? And you're like, oh, okay. So like, what did that thought just randomly trigger as a kid? Like, it's so hard.
Yes. And that's so interesting that kind of comparisonitis can end up driving that next tendency, which is the control, because we've actually done a couple of episodes now on the podcast about control. So
Yeah, right.
that's such a good kind of link into what we've been talking about. I love it. So Lou, what else do we need to tell people about comparisonitis before we finish up?
Oh, I feel like we've kind of touched a lot on everything. One thing I would definitely say is it's comparisonitis. So comparing yourself is the theft of joy and happiness. So if you're, like how we spoke about that when and then, if you're always comparing yourself to someone, you're never going to be happy. Like, you need to be happy with where you are now and how we said, the journey that you're on and what's happening for you. But if you're continually comparing yourself and putting yourself down, you're never going to be happy. And on that be, do, have. So I don't know if you've heard of this. It's from Jim somebody. So it's be, do, have. And then so many people go have, do, be. Okay, that's the general thing. So when I have this, I will be able to do this, and then I will be this person. And so that is that negative association with like the life that you're living and what you're achieving. Whereas when we talk about the frequency and the high vibe and you want to attract that stuff, if you be the person that you want to be, and then you do the things, you're going to have the result. So flipping that to be, do, have instead of have, do, be. And that's going to just change that whole mind, like give you that whole mindset shift and allow you, because if you show up and start being the person, if you start acting like a 3-star rider, I'm looking after my horse, I'm getting the lessons, I'm doing the things, I'm researching, that's going to help your development so much quicker than being like, when I'm a 3-star rider, then I will do those things. So yeah, just being in that, and that's, yeah, just showing up as that person that you need to be in order to achieve the goals that you want. And then that incorporates that vibrational frequency that we were talking about to attract like those good events. And then, yeah, just every competition is a new one. And so being able to have that mindset to deal with your fight or flight response yourself, because if you're in that and you feel like you've got this nervousness, like you've got to prove yourself to someone that you're not good enough to be here, your horse, they don't know the difference between like anything. They can just feel that nervous energy in you. And being that flight animal, they're like, okay, something's going on here. Like, what have I got to be scared of? And so then your results, your performance doesn't happen as like how you want it to. So it's just like a cascade of all the things happening. But yeah, stop comparing, because you're exactly where you need to be all the time. And it couldn't have happened any other way, because it didn't. So that's, yeah, in a nutshell.
I love that. I think that is the most beautiful message to end on. And I love the be, do, have. I think that's so important as well.
Yeah.
So I hadn't heard that before. I think that's fabulous.
Yeah. Is it Jim Fortin or something? I'll have to send it to you. But yeah, that's essentially of, yeah, being that person. So you're in that vibrational frequency of attracting the things that you want, and then everything else goes from there. So
beautiful. And hey, Lucy, where can people find you?
So I'm on Instagram. So I'm Lou Brown _Coolabah. So that was all my horsey stuff beforehand. On my website, www.lucybrown.com.au. I've got some bits and pieces, like I've got a Comparisonitis little mini course on there that you can do. And I also do like a 12-week program of Master Your Equestrian Mindset. Yeah, so the door's open to that in a few weeks. And yeah, it's like an open and close program. So we work together closely for 12 weeks, and then, yeah, we go on to the next one. So yeah.
Beautiful. So for everyone, I will put all of those links in the show notes so that you are able to find Lucy, and go and check out, particularly if you enjoyed our conversation today, please check out the Comparisonitis course. And then if you love that, doors are closing for your program. Did you say in a few weeks? Doors are opening in a few weeks.
Opening in a few weeks. So we kick off around mid-September at the moment.
Yeah. So this is actually perfect timing.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for coming on the podcast and for sharing all of this with us. This has been such a fabulous chat.
Thank you for having me. I hope I didn't ramble too much. I get pretty psyched up about all of it, so it tends to go in all different directions. But yeah, no, stoked to be here. So thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. My goal is to help you more effectively train or rehabilitate your horse by focusing on your mindset and management, both inside and outside of the arena. If this sounds like something you'd like one-on-one help with, or if you'd like to follow along for more, come and join me on Instagram or Facebook @Journey of Equine. The links will be in the show notes. Have a great week, everyone.